What I wanted to tell you is, have you ever had anything happen in a week that made you just go, okay, I want to stop and I don't want to do anything else?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you mad
Yes.
because you just go, I can't do this. I just cannot do it. Well, this morning I had that feeling. I just like, I can't do this anymore. I just can't. So many things happen at so many times. And then you just kind of go, okay, God, what do you want me to do? What kind of feelings do I have in my own life to make me want to continue? And then I started thinking, okay, we're going to do a Sunday school class. That's always fun. And then we add the element of, oh, it's going to be a trilingual Sunday school class. Okay, that brings out a new thing or a problem to try to all figure it out. And we did a good job. And then we get to the song service, and I'm like, okay, we're getting right into it. Just moving right along and have a wonderful song service. And then all of a sudden, I start thinking about this, and I went, okay, I'm going to do a really geeky thing today. Okay? There are sometimes when I start studying, and the people that know me know that I just get stuck. And I can't go on. Have you ever done that? It's like you saw, for example, y'all got to hear me speaking English and a translator. Now, if all you heard was Spanish, would you understand anything? No, because it's a different language. Well, I started studying this week, and I have this beautiful lesson, and I started reading, and all of a sudden, wham, one morning I went, there's something wrong here. Something is just quite not right. So this whole thing is where I got stuck. So as soon as I do this lovely lesson, I'll be able to go on. And this lesson is all about adding to the mix. Because in our previous lessons, what we have done is we've looked at Paul. We've done Paul and Barnabas. And last week it became who? Paul and Timothy and Silas, right? All of a sudden, without us even knowing about it, someone else is added to the mix. And I really want to give him his proper due because he is so dadgum cool. I want to talk to him and find out some things. So when we rely upon a God, we surrender our lives. And that's what happened with these teachers or these evangelists. They surrendered their life and they gave all that they could give to God. And God blessed them. Now, it wasn't always so easy to follow, but they did it. And the next thing we can say is, our relationship is made close when challenges arise. We do know that Paul had problems. For example, last week we talked about Paul and who got into an argument? Barnabas, didn't it? And they ended up splitting and going in different directions. However, did God bless them anyway? Yes. They sure did. And in this case, our relationship, we tend to think more about God when things aren't going so well. At least I do. And I think it comes with age. Because if I was William's age right now and things weren't going the way that I wanted them to go, guess who I wouldn't talk to first? God. I just wouldn't. I'd be mad at Mom. I'd be mad at Dad. Or I'd be mad at Megan. Or I'd be mad at somebody else. But I wouldn't talk to God first. And that's what, as we get older, that's something we learn how to do. We learn that when things aren't going well, we should go to God first. And God will supply our needs. And He has always done it, and He'll never stop. The last thing that I want to say is life is about our walk with God and learning from Him. When we walk with God, we follow what He wants us to do. And just like I said this morning in Sunday school, it's always kind of neat when God wants us to do something and we go, yes, I'm going to go. And God says, okay, I'm going to bless your life because you're going to do it. And that is something we should all realize. God is always working wherever we are. And He's continually working And all He wants us to do is to join Him and do what He wants us to do. So here we are. I'm studying my Bible, and I'm reading, and I'm thinking visually, how can I present this? And I'm reading, and I get stuck. And let's look at this one verse. Let's look at Acts 16:10, and that's found on page 239. I am so sorry I didn't put the right page.
后面新约239页。
So if we look at page 239, let's look at Acts 16, verse 10.
第16章第10节。保罗既看见这异象，我们随即想要往马其顿去，以为神召我们传福音给那里的人听。
Okay. Can anybody see, except for Alan, what got me stuck in this verse? I just looked at that verse and went, wait, there's something new here. And let's look for a minute, okay? Over here, if we look at Acts 16 and 6, it says, Paul and his companions. Ooh, this marker's not going to work. Okay? That's okay. Paul and his companions. That's what 16:6 says, right? Now, what is another way in English that we can put Paul and his companions? They. Right? Because that would refer to Paul and his companions. But let's look at Acts 16 and 10. We. Now there's a big difference between we and they.
第6节的时候，你看第6节上面那个第6节 ，Paul and his companions， 保罗跟他的 ，OK， 跟他的同伴们，对不对？那讲到是保罗跟他的同伴们，那你要说你要提保罗跟他们同伴们，你是不是要用 they， 对不对？但是来你看第10节出现的是 we。
There's a big difference between we and they. Think about it. And I want to ask you the question, what is the difference between we and they?
We is they is
Somebody else, right? When you're referring
The narrator is among.
There you go. Excellent. The narrator is all of a sudden part of the story. That has never occurred in the book of Acts until this verse. So that made, go ahead.
就是写这个东西的人在这里，可是在跟他们一伙的，所以他才会用我们，因为这个人跟他们是一起跟保罗在一起。
So I begin to ask myself, who is we then? And I had to go, who wrote the book of Acts? And let's look at this verse for a second. Okay, I changed this up just a little bit, but let's look at this for a second. Here they are at Antioch. They come up to Derbe. They go to Lystra. And then they're going to go to Alexandria, Troas, or Troas, whichever way you want to say it. And that's where we pick up a new person and the narrator of the book of Acts. Does anybody know who the narrator is? It is Luke. Luke, and we've never talked about Luke, and so I got really excited. I need to talk about who Luke is. And Luke is not your father. Okay? It's a different Luke. That comes from Star Wars, okay? Every time I think of Luke, I have to say that. But let's look at verse 10. The shift is from they to we. And adds another important colleague. It shifts from we to they. And the guy is Luke. I learned so much about this man this week. I think we could have 2 or 3 lessons in just this man. Because I had not a clue. So I'm stuck at 16:10, okay? Because I want to tell you all about Luke. Because this is the only time we'll talk about it. In all of the journeys that Paul goes on, Luke will be referred to, but I want you to get an understanding today who Luke is. And it's fascinating. And I get really geeky. I'm sorry. And what you have to understand is some things about him. Who is Luke? Well, this is what we can say. He is known as Luke the Evangelist. Luke the Evangelist. Now, what does an evangelist do?
Spread the gospel.
They spread the gospel, right? What else does an evangelist do? There's a big difference between a pastor and an evangelist.
Oh, travel.
Oh,
They
yes,
travel.
yeah.
Evangelists are the ones who travel. Yes, Luke became like a missionary. And we don't really talk a lot about Luke. However, we would not know anything about the first church if it wasn't for Luke. And that's pretty amazing. He's also known as Luke, the blank physician, the beloved. So that kind of tells you a lot of information right there. What is a physician?
He's a doctor, a healer.
He's a doctor. He's able to heal. What else can he do?
They're usually well educated.
Very well educated. Don't doctors have to be pretty smart? Don't they also have to know about compounds? Don't they have to know how to treat people? Don't they know how to write in a certain language that most of us don't care to ever know? You know? But he could do this. That's what a physician does. So here we have Luke, one of the most intelligent men writing about Paul. That fascinates me because you have Paul, and where did Paul come from? Tarsus. You were right, started with a T. And he was a Pharisee, so he went through school. Luke went through school. So here we have 2 of the most educated men spreading the gospel. And there's a reason why God called these men, because they had to tackle all of this in a way that we probably couldn't do, because they understood. So let's talk about his life for a second. And this is the things that I read all week long and was going, man, this just really just puts it all together for me and makes me have Luke come alive. Because I have to be honest, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, I thought Luke was a
Disciple.
Disciple.
He wasn't. Mark wasn't either. No. Mark was not. John Mark was his name. Luke was the physician. We only have Matthew and John who were the true disciples that were with Jesus. And that excites me because I learned so much. And I put it all together and I go, this is about the neatest thing. And the Bible comes more alive to me. Because I understand he's a doctor who resided or he lived in Antioch. Now, where's Antioch?
Like close to Tarsus?
Yes, it's close to Tarsus. What other things do we know about Antioch?
It's big.
It's big. Remember, it was the 3rd largest city in the known world at that time. And here's a man practicing medicine. And let's see, what happens with this? There we go. He was a Gentile. There we go. I kind of got it backwards. But he was a doctor who resided in Antioch, and this is the most important thing we need to understand. He, by most scholars, considers him to be a Gentile.
Why do they see him as a Gentile? Was he from a family of
It's his writing style.
Oh,
It's everything that people wrote about him and where he lived and how he resided. He was not a Jew. He was a Gentile.
so he had not went through the rigors of
No.
childhood and.
No. And when you see this and you put all of the elements that Luke went through, it just blows my mind. Because this man did something for us today that the rest of them really didn't do. Because, you know, Paul's letters are personal. Matthew's a narrative, John is a narrative, and then we have Mark, and then you come to Luke. And Luke does something that the other writers don't do. And we'll cover that in just a second. But this is the known facts that we know about Luke. Luke had a special acquaintance with Mary, the mother of Jesus. And just think about that for a second. Okay? And I'm thinking way, way outside of the box. Luke's a doctor. What happened to Mary?
Asian.
She went to Ephesus.
Yes, she went to Ephesus, but isn't she the one that gave birth to Jesus?
Yes.
Wouldn't Luke, from a doctor's standpoint, want to know
Anything special about
anything special?
Yeah.
Is there anything special about this that I need to know?
Yeah.
When you start looking at it from that perspective, that he is a medical doctor, and he had a personal acquaintance with Mary, that sheds a whole new light on the book of Luke.
Wow.
Because Luke's style was he never put things in there that he didn't research and know himself. So when you start reading Luke, the 2nd chapter, and it talks about the birth of Christ, who did he talk to? Mary.
Wow.
And that blows my mind. He also was really good friends with John Mark. Okay? And this is the part that I get really geeky and excited about. This part right here. And everybody goes, well, what's so exciting about this? He died of natural causes at the age of 84 in Bithynia. Let me show you where Bithynia is. Okay, I'm sorry we have to go back just for a second to this map. Okay? Do you see Troas? And I'm not tall enough, I wish I would. But up here is this inlet thing right there. That's Bithynia. That's where Luke resided when he died. Now think about this as well. And you have to read this in chapter 6. Acts 16. If you look at Acts 16, verse 7, look where Paul and the group wanted to go. And read verse 7.
到了美西亚的边界，他们想往庇推尼去，耶稣的灵却不许。
Okay? They tried to go where? Bithynia. And the Spirit said no. But guess where Luke ended up? In Bithynia. Could it be that it was not Paul's to do, but Luke's? That just makes the hair on the back of my head stand up. Because I go, I'm really understanding some things I've never even thought about. And we're going to talk about that whole episode next week. But when you think that Luke died in Bithynia, maybe it was. Because it was Luke's to do, not Paul's. So let's go on. And I'm sorry we have to do it this way, but on top of this, then let's talk about his association with Paul then. Okay? Why did all of a sudden it switch from we to they? I mean, they to we, sorry. From they to we, backwards.
They needed.
Remember? And this is what you have to understand. Who converted Luke? Paul. And you kind of put all of this stuff together and it makes your head spin. At least it did mine, because I'm still stuck on all of this. Because it just blows my mind how just one little word can make a big difference in my life. And how I truly understand this. Not only that, he joined him on his second missionary journey at Tross. And then by next week I will learn how to say that properly. Because like I said, I got stuck on there. But he joined him there. And then what Luke is going to do, and we're going to have to pay attention to this when we study Paul's life, and we go through the book of Acts, all of a sudden when they get to Philippi, Luke stays in Philippi, and it switches back from we to they. And that's interesting. It is so interesting. And you're going to go, well, okay, he's getting really geeky. So let's talk about the books. Let's talk about the way Luke wrote things. Because you really dig deeper and find out some things. Sorry, he accompanied Paul. When Paul came back, this is a prelude to what's going to happen. Paul's going to come back to Philippi, which we haven't studied yet, and Luke's going to stay with him till Paul dies in Rome. In fact, Luke is the one that's going to be with him at the prison at the time of his execution. So this just makes me geeky. It just makes me happy. So let's look about this. Luke wrote the book of Luke and the book of Acts. Okay? How many of you knew that? Okay? When you put those two together, you're going, oh, because really, he used the book of Mark as a source. 20 to 40% of the book of Luke has been referenced from the book of Mark. Because why? Mark knew. Mark was there in Jerusalem when these things were happening. The second thing is, and this is the part that blew my mind, and I just wanted to post it on Twitter, Facebook. I want to go around and tell everybody this important fact that I discovered this week, and probably everybody else knew, but I didn't, because it really makes a difference. 25% of the New Testament is written by Luke. Isn't that wild? 25% of the New Testament is written by Gentiles. Only one other person wrote more than Luke in the New Testament, and that is Paul. And guess what? Paul and Luke knew each other. Paul witnessed to Luke. And here we have two of the greatest men of the New Testament. And we really don't talk a lot about Luke. But this man, it just blows my mind the things he did. And this is the thing that I really want you to pay attention to. And this is where I just could not sit still when I put it all together and I was reading and I was doing the research. The narrativist books began around Acts 16:10. That's when Luke started writing. And so he starts writing, and then he goes and does a lot of background information and puts it all together for us. But we have a definitive time of when Luke started writing. We don't have that definite of a time as we do with Luke's writing. Paul, you guesstimate by 1 or 2 years, but Luke, we can really say it really started around this time. And that just makes me happy. I am so geeky that I think that that is just fascinating. Okay, so let's talk about some more things. Most scholars consider the two books, Luke and Acts, as a 2-volume work. Okay? And in this 2-volume work then, we have it in 3 parts. And when you look at the 3 parts, you go, that really makes sense. Because the first part of the book of Luke is Israel's heritage. In other words, if you look at the first part of the book of Luke, it talks about the beginning to when Jesus was born. It does this long narrative of the lineage. And then Jesus is born. And then John the Baptist comes onto the scene. That is part 1, or volume 1 of the book. Volume 2 is Jesus' life and ministry. That's the second part, Jesus' life and ministry. And the third part, the spreading of the gospel after Jesus' resurrection. Those are the 3 parts of the book of Luke and Acts together. Okay? Only us, well, only through men have they divided it into 2 separate books. Okay? But this was really a 3-volume work here. So let's talk about the writing style, because it makes you want to go read the book of Luke all over again. It makes you want to study. It makes you want to go after those styles and find out what is particularly Greek and why a Greek Gentile could write in this style and give me that information. And the first thing is, he interviewed the people. A lot of the book of Luke has first-person accounts of what happened, and that's because Luke is known through historians to go interview these people and say, what did you think? What did it feel like? What were your expressions? And am I going too fast? Okay. And one example that some of the scholars pointed out was, after Jesus was resurrected, there's a story in the book of Luke about the 2 men going to Emmaus. It's the only time in all the Gospels it's mentioned that 2 men were on a road and Jesus appeared to them. It is known through biblical scholars that Luke went and interviewed these 2 men. And he wrote their accounts into the book of Luke so we could know what happened. He personally dug in and did this research. His writings exhibit a Greek literary style that is not present in any other books of the Bible. So if you want to learn how Greeks thought and how they wrote and their style, you study the book of Luke and then study the book of Acts. And you'll find the Greek world. And believe it or not, Luke and Acts is 25% of the New Testament. Some more things. His writing shows Paul's influence. Why? The book of Acts is really about who? Paul. It really is about Paul. And if you just study the book of Acts, you know everything that Paul did. But in our study of the life of Paul, we're going to pull in all of Paul's letters that he wrote on the journey and make it deeper so that we can understand it. But if you just read the book of Acts, you'd know a lot about Paul. And it's because Luke was there with Paul. Luke would probably talk, and then he would probably go and write some things down, because he wanted these first-person accounts. Second thing is, there are no Jewish influences in the writing. You're not going to find a lot of Jewish symbolism or a lot of Jewish history. You know, like we studied the book of James, and it was all about what was going on in the synagogues, and it was about doing this and this and this. You're not going to find that in Luke and Acts. He totally takes that style out because his story is to tell the way it happened with these people, and so that you can hear and influence. The writings are always referred to as historical narratives. He wanted us to know how it happened. Did they happen in the exact order that Luke wrote them in? Maybe so, maybe not. It was more of a narrative so we could have a historical record. So, here's the thing, and Al and I were having a conversation on this, and this is something that a lot of people don't realize, and it comes from the book of Luke and the book of Acts more than any other place, and we're going to really get into this starting next week, and you're just going to go, wow, these are very important topics that a lot of people had not discussed. For example, he's going to spend a lot of time on the meaning of prayer. And we're going to see from here on out Paul's depth of prayer and what it meant to this they group to we group and how it happens. Because when we go to Philippi, let me tell you, the prayer is what did it.